There are things a mother knows the way she knows her own name. I knew my daughter didn't run away. I knew it the way I knew the sound of her pencil scratching paper at the kitchen table every night, solving puzzles no one asked her to solve. Harper was taken, and for 5 years, nobody believed me. Then my father, a man I hadn't spoken to in 15 years, walked into my library carrying a hand-drawn map and a hunting rifle wrapped in cloth. And everything I thought I knew about him broke apart. Welcome back to the channel. Grab something warm, settle in, and remember, the people in this story had every opportunity to do the right thing. They just didn't. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and stay with me. You're going to need to hear how this ends. I want you to picture a kitchen table. Nothing fancy. Oak, a little scratched. One leg shorter than the others so it rocks if you lean on it wrong. Now picture a girl sitting at that table, 13 years old. Brown hair pulled back with a rubber band she stole from the mail because she could never find a proper hair tie. A pencil in her right hand. A math workbook open in front of her. And a look on her face like the rest of the world was background noise, and the only real thing happening on this entire planet was the equation in front of her. That was Harper. Every single night. My name is Claire Whitmore. I am 42 years old. I work at the Duluth Public Library in Duluth, Minnesota. The kind of town where people know your name at the grocery store and still bring casseroles when someone dies. I used to be an emergency room nurse. I used to be married to a man named Tom, who had a terrible singing voice and an even worse habit of dancing in the kitchen to songs only he could hear. Tom died in a car accident 6 years ago. Black ice on Route 61. A Tuesday in January. A phone call from a number I didn't recognize. People say the sudden kind of loss is the worst. I want to tell you something I've learned. There is no version of losing someone you love that you are prepared for. Not the fast kind. Not the slow kind. And certainly not the kind where your 13-year-old daughter walks into a building full of people and simply never walks out. Harper Rose Whitmore, 13, 5'2", brown eyes that looked almost gold in the right light. A detail I told the police 4 times because I thought it mattered, and they kept writing brown. She wore a bracelet Tom had given her the Christmas before he died. A thin silver chain with a small compass charm. He told her it was so she'd always find her way home. She was wearing it the last time I saw her. It was a Thursday in October. Remember that. Thursdays matter in this story. Harper had qualified for the Minnesota Interstate Mathematics Competition in Minneapolis. 43 students from 12 schools. My daughter, who was so quiet her teachers sometimes forgot she was in the room, had scored higher on the qualifying exam than any student in state history. She didn't brag. She came home, sat at the kitchen table, and started the next problem set. When I told her I was proud, she looked up and said, "Thanks, Mom. Can you pass the eraser?" That was Harper. The world handed her extraordinary, and she treated it like Tuesday. I drove her myself. Dropped her at the front entrance of the Hennepin County Convention Center in downtown Minneapolis. She had her backpack, her calculator, 2 sharpened pencils, and the quiet confidence of a kid who knew she was good at exactly one thing and didn't need anyone to confirm it. She turned once at the glass doors, gave me a wave that was more like a hand twitch, because Harper didn't do big gestures. The doors closed. The crowd swallowed her. That was the last time I saw my daughter. She completed round 1. Score recorded. Completed round 2. Score recorded. Signed in for round 3 at 11:47 in the morning. Her round 3 score was never recorded. Somewhere between the sign-in desk and the competition hall, in a building full of students and teachers and security staff, Harper Rose Whitmore vanished. No one saw her leave. No one saw anyone take her. The security cameras in the hallway, connecting the sign-in area to the competition rooms, had been offline for 2 weeks, because the building was mid-renovation. 2 weeks. I learned that detail 3 days later, and it landed in my stomach like something with teeth. The police were called at 1:15, when a proctor noticed Harper's seat was empty. By the time I arrived, the building had been searched twice. By the time the detective sat me down in a room that smelled like stale coffee and copy toner, I already knew what he was going to say. His face had that careful, rehearsed look people wear when they are about to rearrange every molecule in your body. Mrs. Whitmore, we have reason to believe Harper may have left the building voluntarily. I stared at him. Given Harper's recent family circumstances, the loss of her father, the transition to a single-parent household, our working theory is that she experienced emotional distress and chose to leave on her own. What happened inside me wasn't anger. Not yet. Anger came later, when I had the energy for it. What happened was something quieter and more devastating. The realization that the people whose job it was to find my daughter had already decided she didn't want to be found. I said, Harper didn't run away. He said, I understand this is difficult. You don't understand anything. My daughter doesn't run. She solves. If Harper was in trouble, she wouldn't run from it. She'd sit at a table and work through it with a pencil until it made sense. He wrote something in his notebook. It didn't matter. I could see it in his eyes. He had his theory, and my daughter's empty chair was already becoming a statistic. They searched for 6 weeks. Dogs and volunteers, and a Facebook page that Meg from the library helped me create. 6 weeks of every neighbor in Duluth putting Harper's photo in their window. 6 weeks that produced exactly nothing. Then the searches stopped. The volunteers went home. The detective called less, then not at all. And I was left standing in Harper's bedroom doorway, looking at a desk with a math workbook still open, a pencil still lying across the page, and a silence so complete it had a sound. That was 5 years ago. And for 5 years, I carried that knowing like a stone in my chest. The knowing that my daughter didn't run, that someone took her, that the world had looked at my grief and decided it was easier to call it denial. Until the morning the front door of the library opened, and a ghost walked in. You'd think 5 years would dull it. Like a blade left in the rain, you'd expect the edge to soften, the pain to rust into something manageable. It doesn't. It just learns where to sit. It finds the quietest corner of your chest and waits there, patient as gravity, for the smallest thing. A pencil on a counter, a girl the right height on a sidewalk, a Thursday to pull it back to the surface. I'll tell you what 5 years of a missing daughter looks like from the inside. I sold the house. 237 Birch Lane. The kitchen table. The bedroom with the math workbook still open on the desk. Every room was a museum of a life that stopped mid-sentence. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat on 3rd Street that smelled like dryer sheets and other people's lives. I quit nursing. You can't hold someone else's broken child in an emergency room when your own is somewhere you can't reach. I took the library job because books don't bleed, and the Dewey Decimal System doesn't care if you've been crying in the back room. I spent everything. Savings, then Tom's life insurance, then money I didn't have. I hired 2 private investigators who told me nothing the police hadn't already. I pinned maps to my apartment wall, highlighted documents, stayed up until 3 in the morning reading missing children forums, and slowly became the kind of person that concerned friends describe as not doing well in hushed tones. I could hear them. I just didn't care. The one thing that kept me tethered was the library. And the one person who kept me tethered to the library was Meg Calloway. Meg was 53, had the posture of a retired ballet dancer and the vocabulary of a sailor on shore leave, and had been head librarian at Duluth Public for 19 years. She never once asked me if I was okay. She understood the question was an insult because the answer was obvious. What Meg did instead was show up. Every Thursday morning, she placed a cup of coffee on the circulation desk in front of me. Black, 2 sugars, never said a word about it. Just set it down and went back to shelving returns like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. It was the most extraordinary act of kindness anyone gave me in 5 years. There was one night in year 4 I need to tell you about. 2 in the morning. I was standing in my apartment, staring at the wall. The maps, the printed emails, the highlighted police reports, the red string connecting pushpins like I was a television detective, except television detectives eventually solve the case. And I was just a woman connecting nothing to nothing. I reached for the first pushpin. I was going to take it all down. My fingers touched the pin, and my eyes landed on a photograph just below it. Harper, 12 years old, on Tom's lap on the porch of 237 Birch Lane, both laughing. And on her wrist, catching the afternoon sun, the little silver compass bracelet. I pulled my hand back, left the wall, went to bed without sleeping, which was normal. But that night the not sleeping felt different, less like drowning and more like holding my breath on purpose, waiting for something I couldn't name. The next morning was a Thursday, February. The kind of Minnesota cold that doesn't bite. It moves in. I was behind the circulation desk at 8:45, 15 minutes before opening, when the front door opened. We weren't open yet. I looked up, ready to deliver my polite "we open at 9" speech, and every word evaporated. Standing in the doorway of the Duluth Public Library, letting in a blade of winter air that cut across the room like a warning, was my father, Jack Whitmore Sr., 69 years old, a man I had not spoken to in 15 years. The last time I'd seen him, I was 27, standing in a hospital hallway, watching my mother die, while the one person who should have been holding her hand was 3 bars deep in a bottle at a motel he couldn't remember checking into. He looked different, thinner. His hair was completely white. His hands were steady, which I noticed because the last time I'd seen them, they hadn't been, and his eyes were clear. That stopped me. I had never, not once, seen my father's eyes completely clear. He was carrying 2 things, a rolled-up piece of paper in his left hand and something long wrapped in dark cloth in his right. He walked to the circulation desk, set the paper down, then carefully laid the wrapped object beside it. The cloth fell open slightly and I saw the stock of a hunting rifle. Old, well-maintained. "Get out," I said. I wanted it to sound like a door slamming. It came out like a door barely closing. "Get out of my library." He didn't move. His hands pressed flat on the desk. "Claire, I know you hate me. You have every right. But I need 60 seconds before you decide what to do with that hate. After that, if you want me gone, I'll walk out and you'll never see me again." Something in his voice. Something underneath the words that didn't sound like the man I remembered. That man was loose, slippery, always one drink from a promise he couldn't keep. This man was solid. Every word cost him something. I said nothing. He took it as permission. He unrolled the paper. A map. Hand-drawn. Precise. The kind of detail that comes from an engineer's hand. Lines. Measurements. Small notations in cramped handwriting. In the center, circled in red ink, an island in the middle of Lake Superior. Beside a building marked server wing, in red handwriting, a single word. "Harper." My father looked at me with eyes I hadn't seen sober in 20 years, and said, "I know where Harper is. She's alive, and we have 22 days, Claire. After that, they'll move her somewhere we will never find." The library was silent. The clock ticked. The heater hummed. Outside, snow fell on Duluth the way it always does, slowly, constantly, like the sky has nowhere better to be. And inside my chest, the stone I'd been carrying for 5 years cracked clean in half. My father hadn't touched a drink in 5 years. I didn't know that. I didn't know a lot of things about the man sitting in the driver's seat beside me, starting with the fact that he'd been looking for my daughter longer than the police ever had. We left Duluth in his truck, an old Ford that smelled like engine oil and pine air freshener, which was such a aggressively normal combination that it made the hunting rifle behind the seat and the hand-drawn map on my lap feel even more surreal. I hadn't agreed to anything. I hadn't forgiven anything. But when a man tells you your daughter is alive, and you have 22 days, you don't stand in a library, debating your feelings about his parenting failures. You get in the truck. For the first 20 minutes, neither of us spoke. I watched the Minnesota landscape slide past the window. Snow-packed roads, bare birch trees, gray sky pressing down on everything like a lid. I had imagined conversations with my father over the years. Angry ones, mostly. Speeches I'd rehearsed in the shower about what kind of man misses his wife's death because he's too drunk to answer the phone. None of those speeches started with him being sober and telling me my daughter was on an island. So I threw out the script. 5 years, I said without looking at him. You've been sober 5 years and you never once called. His hands shifted on the wheel. Would you have answered? That's why I didn't call. He paused. I didn't get sober to earn your forgiveness, Claire. I got sober because Harper disappeared. And I realized that if I kept drinking, I was going to be useless to the only 2 people left on this earth that I owed something to. I turned to look at him. He kept his eyes on the road. Start from the beginning, I said. Don't skip anything. Jack Whitmore Sr. spent 40 years as a marine engineer. He built boats. He fixed boats. He understood systems, the way things connect. How one broken component cascades into failure across an entire structure. When Harper disappeared, and the police closed the case, and the trail went cold, Jack did what an engineer does. He pulled the blueprints. He started collecting data. Every missing child case in Minnesota for the past 15 years. Then he expanded. Wisconsin, Michigan, the entire upper Midwest. He cross-referenced ages, academic records, family structures, circumstances of disappearance. He built spreadsheets. He mapped patterns. He did this alone, in a rented room in Bayfield, Wisconsin, sober for the first time in decades, running on coffee, and something he said he couldn't name, but I recognized immediately because I'd been running on it for 5 years too. It took him 2 years to find the pattern, and when he described it, I felt something cold move through me that had nothing to do with the Minnesota winter outside. Every child who matched Harper's profile, high academic achievement, single-parent household, limited extended family, had disappeared in a public setting, a school event, a competition, a field trip, places with crowds and movement, and just enough chaos to make a disappearance look like a choice. It's not random, Jack said. It's selection. The company was called Pinnacle Learning Systems. On paper, an education technology firm. They developed testing software, learning platforms, the kind of products school districts buy with federal grants. They had contracts in 32 states. They had a board of directors with university credentials and government connections. They were, by every visible measure, legitimate. Buried beneath 4 layers of subsidiary companies and offshore accounts, Pinnacle operated something called the Lighthouse Protocol. Jack said the name like it tasted wrong. On paper, it's a residential program for gifted youth. Advanced research immersion. The kind of thing wealthy parents would pay 6 figures for. He glanced at me. But the children in the program didn't have wealthy parents. They didn't have parents who would come looking with lawyers and media attention. They had parents like you, Claire. Single. Stretched thin. Already fighting a system that wasn't listening. If you've made it this far in this story, I need you to hear what I'm about to say. Because this is where it stops being a story about a missing girl and starts being something else entirely. Hit subscribe and stay with me. This matters. Pinnacle identified children through public data, state gifted registries, national math and science competition results, school district records that were supposed to be protected but weren't. They built profiles. They watched. They waited for the right moment. A moment with crowds, with gaps in security, with enough confusion to make a 13-year-old girl vanish between a sign-in desk and a competition hall. Harper's qualifying scores were in the state registry 6 weeks before the Minneapolis competition, Jack said. His voice was flat. The kind of flat that comes from repeating something you've verified so many times. The horror has been sanded down to fact. Her family profile was accessible through the school district database. Single mother, deceased father. No extended family involvement. He paused. They'd been watching her for 6 months, Claire. She was on a list before she ever walked into that convention center. I pressed my hand flat against the dashboard. I needed something solid. Where are they keeping her? I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. An island in Lake Superior. Upper Peninsula side, near the Michigan border. The property is registered as a private research campus. It's not on any civilian maps. 200 acres of pine forest and 5 buildings designed to be invisible from the water. How many children? 12. Currently. Plus staff. The operation is run by a man named Nathan Voss, former tech executive. The kind of man who sees children as processing power. Nathan Voss. I filed that name somewhere dark and permanent. And the 22 days? I said. Jack was quiet for a beat. I have a contact inside the facility. A mathematician named Dr. Owen Hale. He was hired to develop the curriculum. Took him about a year to understand what the program actually was. Another beat. He contacted me 4 months ago. He's been feeding me information since. Why? Why would he risk that? Jack's hands tightened on the wheel. Because Harper won't stop fighting them. 5 years and she still hasn't cooperated the way they need her to. She's been doing something, Claire. Something Owen discovered 3 months ago that nobody else noticed. I waited. Your daughter has been hiding messages inside her math work. Every equation she solves, she embeds a numerical sequence. Owen ran the sequences. Their coordinates. He looked at me. She's been writing our address, Claire. 237 Birch Lane, for 3 years. In the only language they couldn't take from her. The highway stretched out ahead of us, white and endless. Trees blurred past. The heater hummed. And I sat in that passenger seat and understood, for the first time in 5 years, that my daughter had been reaching for me the same way I'd been reaching for her. Quietly, stubbornly, in a language only we could understand. But Nathan Voss had run out of patience for stubborn. Owen had told Jack that Harper had been placed on something the program called phase out. 30 days. After 30 days, non-compliant subjects were relocated to a facility that Owen had never been able to locate and that no one who entered had ever returned from. 22 days remained. My daughter had been sending messages home for 3 years using nothing but math. And we had 22 days to answer. We drove in silence for a while after that. Not the hostile silence of the first 20 minutes. Something different. The kind of silence that happens when 2 people have just looked at the same terrible thing and neither one knows what to say about it yet. It was Jack who broke it. Quietly, without preamble. The way you say something you've been carrying for too long. Your mother wrote me a letter before she died. I turned my head. He kept his eyes on the road. Eleanor wrote it 3 weeks before the end. Gave it to a nurse at the hospice with instructions to mail it to my last known address. Took 4 months to reach me because I'd moved twice by then. And the postal service isn't known for tracking down drunks in motel rooms. A pause. I didn't open it for 2 years. Kept it in the glove compartment of whatever car I was driving at the time. Moved it from glove compartment to glove compartment like some kind of cursed heirloom. Why didn't you open it? Because I knew what it said. Or I thought I did. I thought it was going to be everything I deserved. Every failure, every missed birthday, every night she needed me and I was somewhere else. I figured she'd spent her last weeks putting it all on paper so I'd have to carry it the rest of my life. He was quiet for a moment. I was wrong. I waited. She forgave me. His voice shifted. Something underneath it cracked slightly, like ice giving way over deep water. Your mother forgave me. She wrote that she wasn't doing it because I deserved it, but because carrying the anger was killing her faster than the cancer. She said holding on to it was like drinking poison and waiting for someone else to get sick. He paused again. She said she hoped I'd find a reason to put the bottle down, and she said she was sorry she wouldn't be there to see it if I did. The highway hummed beneath us. Snow fell. I stared at the windshield and tried to feel something specific but couldn't. It was all there, the anger, the grief, the unexpected ache of hearing my mother's grace, described by the man who least deserved it, but it was tangled together in a knot I wasn't ready to pull apart. Jack reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. Yellowed, creased, soft at the edges from years of handling. He held it out to me. I've been carrying this for 7 years. It's not mine to keep. It's yours. I looked at the envelope. My mother's handwriting on the front. Jack's name. An old address in Ashland. A stamp with a flag on it. Something so small and ordinary holding something so enormous inside. I'm not ready for that yet, I said. Jack nodded. Put the envelope back in his pocket. I know. But it'll be here when you are. We pulled into Bayfield at dusk. If you've never been to Bayfield, Wisconsin in February, imagine a postcard someone left out in the cold too long. Beautiful, but frozen. The harbor was a sheet of white ice interrupted by a narrow channel of black water that cut through the center like a wound. Fishing boats locked in place. Docks empty. The kind of quiet that only exists in small lake towns in deep winter, where the silence has weight and the cold has teeth. Jack parked at the far end of the marina lot. Through the windshield, I could see a figure standing at the end of the dock, collar turned up, hands in pockets, looking out at the water like he was waiting for something he wasn't sure was coming. That's Owen, Jack said. Dr. Owen Hale was not what I expected. He was 52, thin, with the kind of face that looked like it had been assembled for a completely different life. The life of a man who grades papers and drinks tea and argues about theorems at faculty dinners. Not the life of a man who'd spent 4 months smuggling information off an island where stolen children were forced to work. He shook my hand at the end of the dock. His grip was firm, but his eyes were exhausted. The kind of exhausted I recognized immediately. I'd been wearing it for 5 years. Let's get inside, he said. No small talk. I appreciated that. We sat in a booth at a small fish restaurant 3 blocks from the harbor. Owen ordered nothing. Jack ordered coffee. I ordered coffee and didn't drink it. Owen pulled a rolled tube of paper from inside his coat and spread it across the table, anchoring the corners with a salt shaker, a sugar dispenser, Jack's coffee mug, and my untouched cup. The map was detailed in a way that made my chest tight. Every building labeled. Every path marked. Guard rotation times written in small red numbers. A perimeter fence drawn in double lines with X marks, where the sensors were placed. 200 acres, Owen said. 5 structures. Administrative, 2 dormitories, a research lab, and the server wing where the advanced subjects work. He paused on that word. Subjects. I watched him swallow like it tasted wrong. Security staff of 14, armed. Rotations every 8 hours. 1 access road, monitored. 1 dock on the south side, also monitored. And 1 abandoned dock on the north side that hasn't been maintained or checked in 3 years. He tapped the north dock on the map. That's our way in. And Harper? I said. Server wing, east corridor, last room on the left. He said it like coordinates, precise, automatic. Then his voice changed, softened. He reached into his coat again and pulled out a folded sheet of paper, opened it carefully, and slid it across the table to me. It was a printout, rows of numbers, equations, Harper's handwriting, which I would have recognized in a burning building, clean, small, slightly left-leaning, the way it had always been since she first learned to hold a pencil. Every assignment she completes, Owen said, she embeds a sequence in her work. I noticed it by accident 8 months ago. A repeating numerical pattern that didn't belong in the equations she was solving. I ran the sequences through a coordinate converter. He pointed to a string of numbers he'd circled in blue ink. 46.7832 north. 92.1065 west. I stared at him. 237, Birch Lane, Duluth, Minnesota, he said quietly. Your old address. She's been encoding it into every piece of work she submits. For 3 years, Claire. Every equation. Every problem set. Your daughter has been writing her way home in the only language they gave her access to. I picked up the paper, looked at the numbers, looked at Harper's handwriting. 3 years. My girl had been sitting in a room on an island, surrounded by people who saw her as a processor, a function, a thing that computes, and she had turned their own language into a letter home. Every equation a message. Every solution a whisper. 237 Birch Lane. I'm still here. I remember. Come find me. I set the paper down. pressed both hands flat on the table, breathed. Owen looked at Jack. Jack looked out the window at the frozen harbor. The channel is still open, Jack said. Has been for 2 days because of the warm front, but the temperature is dropping tonight. We have maybe 6 hours before it freezes shut. After that, no boat gets through until spring. He looked at me. It's now, or it's never, Claire. I picked up my coffee, drank it in one long swallow. It was cold and terrible, and I didn't care. Then it's now, I said. I had never been on a boat in winter. I had never trusted my father with anything that mattered. That night, on Lake Superior, I had to do both. And I want to be honest with you. Neither one came naturally. Jack's boat was docked at the far end of Bayfield Marina. A 26-foot fishing vessel named, and I am not making this up, Second Chance. I looked at the name on the hull, then looked at my father, and he said, I didn't name it. It came that way. I didn't believe him. I got on anyway. Owen climbed aboard after me, holding his coat tight against his chest. The hard drive was in there. 4 months of smuggled documents, photographs, internal communications. He sat in the small cabin below deck and didn't come up. The lake was not his territory. It was Jack's. I had never seen my father on the water. I had seen him at kitchen tables with a bottle. I had seen him asleep on couches that weren't his. I had seen him standing in a hospital parking lot, too late and too drunk, while my mother died on the 3rd floor. But I had never seen him here. And here was a different man. His hands moved across the controls with a certainty I didn't recognize. He read the water the way Harper read equations, instinctively, like a language he'd been born speaking. He checked the wind, adjusted the throttle, guided the boat through the narrow channel between walls of ice without a single wasted motion. For the first time in my life, I saw my father be good at something. Not adequate. Good. The kind of good that comes from 40 years of knowing exactly where you belong. The lake was black, not dark. Black. The kind that swallows a flashlight beam, 2 feet from the surface. The air hurt to breathe, so I breathed through my mouth and tasted iron and pine and something ancient that was just the lake reminding you it was here before you and would be here after. About 40 minutes out, Jack spoke without turning from the wheel. The night I finally opened your mother's letter, I was in a motel in Ashland, 11 miles from here, sober for 60 hours, the longest I'd gone in 15 years, shaking so hard I could hear my teeth. I pulled my jacket tighter. I opened it because I thought it would finish me. Whatever Eleanor wrote would be the thing that made me stop trying. He adjusted the wheel. Instead, she wrote about the garden she planted the spring you were born. Tomatoes that came up crooked. She loved them anyway because they were trying. His voice shifted. She said people are like that too. Crooked and trying. And she forgave me. Not because I earned it. Because the anger was killing her faster than the cancer, and she wanted to spend her last days light. Stars overhead. Ice gleaming on either side of the channel. She saved my life with that letter, Jack said quietly. And I decided if I couldn't save hers, I would save her granddaughter's. I didn't respond. But something inside me, a wall I'd built 15 years ago, developed its first crack. Not a collapse. Just a crack. Enough to let something through. I wasn't ready to name. An hour in, the wind changed. Northeast, hard and sudden. The boat pitched sideways. Water sprayed over the gunwale. I grabbed for the railing and missed. My boots slid on the wet deck, and for 1 second I was going over, the black water reaching up like a hand. Jack caught me. One arm, fast. His other hand on the wheel. Pulled me against the cabin wall and held me until I had my footing. 3 seconds. He didn't say anything. Just held on until I was steady, then let go. 3 seconds. The first time my father had caught me in 15 years. The first time he'd been there when I was falling, instead of being the reason I fell. I stood against that wall with salt water on my face and thought about Eleanor's crooked tomatoes. Things that grow wrong but try anyway. The island appeared through the mist like something that wasn't supposed to exist. Dark pine trees rising from the water. No lights. No sound. A silence so thick it felt deliberate, like the island was holding its breath. Jack cut the engine and let the current carry us to the north dock. Old wooden pilings, half collapsed, a rusted cleat, a ladder untouched for years. We tied off and climbed up. Jack, then me, then Owen, who moved like a man crossing a line he couldn't uncross. The forest was dense, dark, and smelled like pine needles and frozen earth. Owen led with surprising certainty, stepping over roots, ducking branches, following a path he'd walked before in his mind. After 15 minutes, he stopped beside a small metal box on a tree trunk. "Perimeter sensor," he whispered. "Disabled this one, and the next two last shift. They'll read as a system glitch." We moved through. The trees thinned, and the facility was there. 5 buildings, low and gray, in a loose semicircle. No signs, no flags, nothing to indicate this place held 12 stolen children and called itself a school. The server wing sat on the eastern edge. 2 stories, flat roof, a single light above a steel door casting a pale circle on frozen ground. Owen led us to a maintenance door at the back. Keypad. He punched a code. The lock clicked. The hallway was fluorescent and hummed at a frequency designed to make you feel like you were inside a machine. Polished concrete floor. White walls. It smelled like industrial cleaner and recycled air, and something underneath that I can only describe as absence. The absence of laughter, of music, of anything that makes a place feel like it holds human beings rather than stores them. Owen pointed left. East corridor. First door. Closed. Dark inside. Second door. Closed. Same. Third door. End of the corridor. Last room on the left. I put my hand flat against it. Cold metal. Behind this door, maybe, probably, was the girl who sat at a kitchen table with a pencil and a rubber band in her hair, solving puzzles no one asked her to solve. The girl who wore a compass bracelet because her father said it would help her find her way home. The girl who had been writing that home's address into equations for 3 years, trusting someone would read the numbers and understand. 5 years of Thursdays, 5 years of cold coffee, and dead ends, and Meg's silent coffee, and a stone in my chest. It all came down to this door. I pushed it open. The room was small. A cot against the wall. A metal desk, with a computer monitor glowing blue. No window. A single overhead light, the kind that hums at a pitch just high enough to slowly drive you out of your mind. And on the desk, beside the keyboard, a sheet of paper with numbers written on it in handwriting I would have recognized at the bottom of the ocean. 237 Birch Lane. Over and over. Filling the margins, crawling down the edges. Written in pencil, the same way she used to write at our kitchen table. Small and left-leaning, and absolutely certain. She was sitting on the cot. 18 years old. 5 years older than the girl I'd last seen walking through glass doors in Minneapolis. Her hair was short. Her shoulders were broader. There was a scar along her left collarbone that hadn't been there before. And her eyes, those brown gold eyes I'd described to the police 4 times, were sharper than I remembered. Harder. The kind of hard that comes from learning very young that the world is not what you were promised. But the way she looked up when the door opened, that reflex, that instant alertness, chin up, shoulders set, scanning the doorway for threat before anything else. I recognized that. Not because I'd seen it before, but because it was mine. That was my reflex. The emergency room nurse in me, the part that assessed a situation before it felt it. She developed it on her own, in this room, on this island, and it looked exactly the same. She stared at me. I stared at her. 5 years of Thursdays collapsed into about 4 seconds of pure, wordless reality. Then Harper said, in a voice that was lower than I remembered and steadier than I expected, "You took your time, Mom." And I said, because apparently grace under pressure is not genetic, traffic was terrible. She broke first. I broke a half-second later. And in that gray, humming, terrible little room, we met in the middle, and I held my daughter for the first time in 5 years. She was taller than me now. I didn't care. I held on like the floor might open up and take her again, and she held on the same way. And I could feel her shaking, or maybe I was shaking, or maybe the whole building was shaking, and it didn't matter because she was here, and she was real, and she was warm and alive. I pulled back, looked at her face, looked at her wrist, the compass bracelet, tarnished, scratched, the clasp replaced with a piece of wire. But there, still there. You never stopped, I whispered, looking at the paper on the desk. The address. 3 years of writing home in numbers. Harper looked at me with those hard, gold-brown eyes that softened for just a moment. Neither did you, if you've stayed with me this long. And I hope you have. Do me one quick thing. Hit that subscribe button. 97% of people listening right now haven't done it, and it costs you nothing. But it means this story and others like it keep getting told. Thank you. Genuinely. Now stay with me, because we're not out yet. Owen appeared in the doorway. His face was tight. We need to move. Now. Harper moved fast. No hesitation. She grabbed nothing from that room. There was nothing in it worth taking. She stepped into the hallway like someone who had memorized every exit, every corner, every blind spot in this building, which, I realized, she probably had. 5 years of quiet observation. 5 years of solving the puzzle of this place the way she solved everything else, methodically, patiently, with a pencil and absolute certainty. We were halfway down the corridor when it happened. A sound I will never forget as long as I live. A high, sharp tone, followed by the hallway lights switching from white to red, pulsing like a heartbeat. Perimeter alert, Owen said. His voice was calm in a way that meant he was not calm at all. We have 4 minutes before security reaches this wing. 4 minutes. 4 minutes is a song on the radio. 4 minutes is the time it takes to make a pot of coffee. 4 minutes is also, as it turns out, enough time to save a life if you don't waste a single second. We ran. Back through the corridor, out the maintenance door, into the frozen dark. Harper ran ahead of me. Faster, stronger. 5 years of whatever they'd put her through had made her body something different than the 13-year-old who couldn't do a pull-up in gym class. She moved through the trees like she knew them. Maybe she did. Jack was at the dock, engine already running. He'd heard the alarm from the water. The boat was untied and idling, ready. Owen went down first, then Harper, then me. Jack hit the throttle before I'd fully sat down, and the boat lurched forward into the black water, leaving the island behind us. I looked back. The facility was lit up now, every light blazing, figures moving between buildings, flashlight beams cutting through the trees. They were looking for us. But we were already on the water, and the water was Jack's territory, and my father drove that boat through the dark like a man who had spent his entire broken life preparing for exactly this moment. Harper sat beside me in the cabin. She hadn't let go of my hand since the dock. I hadn't let go of hers. Owen sat across from us, the hard drive out of his coat now, a laptop open on his knees. His fingers moved fast. 3 simultaneous sends, he said, not looking up. FBI Field Office, Minneapolis. A journalist at the Washington Post who's been investigating education fraud for 2 years. And Senator Lindquist's office, Minnesota, Armed Services Committee. He looked up. They can't block all 3. He hit send. Sat back. Closed the laptop. It's sent, he said. The boat hummed. The island shrank behind us. Harper's hand was warm in mine. And somewhere in the dark, moving across water that had been frozen shut 6 hours later, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in 5 years. I'll tell you about the justice. Because you came for it, and I promised. We didn't burn the island down. We didn't confront Nathan Voss in a dramatic showdown. We are not those people. What we did was quieter and considerably more permanent. 48 hours after Owen hit send, the FBI opened a federal investigation into Pinnacle Learning Systems. 2 weeks later, the island was raided. Nathan Voss was arrested on a Tuesday morning while eating breakfast. I know this because Owen sent me a photograph. The man who stole my daughter was holding a coffee cup when they put the handcuffs on him. Somehow that detail was more satisfying than anything I'd ever imagined. 11 other children were recovered from that island. I won't describe those reunions because they belong to those families. But I followed every single one, and I kept a list of their names. Pinnacle Learning Systems was dissolved by court order 4 months later. Every executive who signed off on Lighthouse Protocol faced federal charges. It was not fast justice. It was not Hollywood justice. It was the slow, grinding, paper-heavy kind that doesn't make for exciting television but has the enormous advantage of being permanent. That was more than enough. They recovered 11 other children from that island. I won't tell you their stories because they don't belong to me, but I followed every one. I kept a list of their names, handwritten, in the same pencil Harper used to use at our kitchen table. That list is still in my desk drawer at the library. Some things you keep not because you need them, but because forgetting would be a kind of betrayal. Meg Calloway was standing outside the library when we pulled into Duluth. I don't know how she knew. Small towns have a frequency that carries news faster than any phone call. She was on the front steps in her winter coat, arms crossed, and when Harper stepped out of the truck, Meg's face did something I'd never seen. In 5 years of Thursday coffees, it crumbled. Harper looked at her and said, "You must be the coffee lady. Mom talks about you." Meg wiped her eyes with both hands. "Something in my eye." "Both eyes," Harper said. Meg pointed at her. "I don't know you well enough for you to be smart with me yet." Then she pulled Harper into a hug so tight I heard my daughter laugh for the first time in 5 years. It was lower than I remembered. But it was hers. The weeks after were not a movie. No montage. No swelling orchestra. Recovery is a season, and seasons move slowly. Harper had nightmares. She flinched at sounds she shouldn't have. She spent 3 days silent, then an entire afternoon talking so fast I couldn't follow. She saw a therapist in Minneapolis twice a week. She was a young woman with significant trauma who needed time in a world that didn't ask her to be okay on anyone's schedule but her own. But there were moments. Small ones. The kind God places in your path when He knows you need them most. The first morning Harper sat at my kitchen table, the new apartment that wasn't 237 Birch Lane, but had the same scratched oak table, because I couldn't help myself, and picked up a pencil. She didn't do math. She opened the newspaper and started the crossword puzzle. Top left corner, methodical, the way she'd done every morning before Minneapolis. She got halfway through, put the pencil down, and looked out the window for a long time. But she'd picked it up. That was enough. Then I noticed the bracelet. Tom's compass bracelet, still on her wrist. The clasp was gone, replaced with a twist of wire. The silver was nearly black. But it was there. 5 years, a different name, an island, a room with no windows, and she'd kept it. I asked her about it once. She looked at her wrist and said, "Dad said it would help me find my way home." He wasn't wrong. I had to leave the room for that one. Some things hit you on a delay. Jack went back to Bayfield. His boat, his rented room, his quiet life on the water. But he called every Sunday. And Harper and I drove up once a month, then twice. Then it stopped being a schedule and became something that just happened. The way family does when it decides to stop being careful and start being real. It was on one of those visits that I finally took the letter. We were sitting on the dock at Bayfield, the 3 of us. Harper was working a crossword torn from the Sunday paper. Jack was watching the lake, which is what Jack did when he didn't know what to say, which was most of the time, which was fine. The water was open now, spring. The channel that nearly froze us in was wide and blue and looked nothing like the black mirror we'd crossed in the dark. Jack reached into his coat, pulled out the envelope, set it on the dock between us. I picked it up. My mother's handwriting. Eleanor Whitmore. Her name in letters that leaned slightly left, the same way Harper's did, the same way mine did. 3 generations of women who couldn't write straight and didn't particularly want to. I read it. 6 pages of my mother's voice, clear as if she were beside me. The garden. The crooked tomatoes. The forgiveness Jack had described on the boat. But reading it in her hand was different. It was her. Proof that the people we lose still find ways to reach us, still find ways to speak, if we're willing to listen. I looked at Jack, this flawed, broken, rebuilt man who had missed my mother's death and missed 15 years of my life and then driven a boat across a frozen lake in the dark to bring my daughter home. She forgave you, I said. I think I'm starting to understand why. He looked at the water. I wasn't looking for forgiveness. I was looking for a reason to deserve it. He paused. Harper gave me that. Harper glanced up from her crossword. So who's going to teach me to drive? Because I've got 5 years of normal to catch up on. Jack almost smiled. God help us all. Harper grinned. And I want to tell you about that grin. It was Tom's. The same one he wore dancing in the kitchen to music no one else heard. Crooked and trying and absolutely, stubbornly alive. Some things, it turns out, they cannot take. I think about that often, about the things that survive, about the way God builds something stubborn into the people who need it most. A refusal to let go. A compass that keeps pointing home, no matter how many times someone tries to spin it. I think about a 13-year-old girl writing her address into equations for 3 years because she believed, with quiet certainty, that her mother was still looking. And I think about forgiveness. Not the polite kind, the real kind. The kind my mother wrote about in a letter that waited 7 years to be read. The kind that costs something. The kind God asks of us not because the person deserves it, but because the weight of carrying it will crush you long before it touches them. There are things a mother knows the way she knows her own name. I knew my daughter didn't run. I knew someone took her. I knew the world was wrong. And now I know one more thing. Some things, when they finally come home, bring back more than what was lost. They bring back the parts of you that were gone. The crooked, trying, stubborn, impossible reasons to keep going. Harper is home. And so, it turns out, am I. If this story found something in you, I'd be grateful if you shared it with someone who might need it. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and tell me in the comments about the person in your life who never stopped looking, or the one who finally came home. These stories matter because you make them matter. And as always, thank you for being here. God bless you and yours.